Hey YouTube, this video is about why my mindset is oriented towards publishing lots of little things like this. So YouTube videos of ad libs, little notebook posts on my website, newsletters, tweet threads, tweets, all that kind of thing. Why I aim for unfinished packets of work like this and put them out there rather than leave them in a note-taking system on my own and then publish a more polished product at the end. And one of the main benefits I found of doing this is that by publishing something, I'm creating a kind of chunk in my mind that I can then come back to. So the idea of a chunk comes from the working memory theories around you can only hold, say, 3 to 7 items in your working memory at any given time. And one thing I love about this theory is that the things that you can hold in your working memory is not like a word or a number, but chunks that you've already put together and defined in one kind of group. So this is why we tend to put numbers together in phone numbers. So 5, 3, 3 or something is the number format, rather than individual numbers, because we can remember the 5 numbers, area code, and then 2 blocks of 3. That would be then 3 chunks rather than 11 chunks of numbers. And this is what I'm doing when I create a video like this, is that I'm taking the information I have in my mind about a subject and turning it into a working chunk or a kind of intermediate chunk that I can then riff on or reference later on some other way, either in conversation or in a video like this, or when I'm writing or on a podcast. And I found this to be really useful because now that I'm having more say podcasts, being invited on more, I'm not planning ahead in the conversation in terms of word for word what I'm going to say. But when someone asks me a question, I can very quickly now just kind of go through all the chunks that are relevant. Like, oh, I've written something about that over here. Oh, I've made a YouTube video on that. And I organize those chunks. And then I basically go into the same, I go into the chunk and almost read out, if you like. So if I have a notebook post on something, I've done the work already in structuring my thinking and it's contained within those 300 or 400 words. Or I'll go through the same argument as I had in a YouTube video, it's again in the context of that conversation. So I'm not coming up again with the material, I'm just going into the chunk and putting the chunk in that conversation where relevant. So that makes it much easier to know that when I'm asked a question or when something creative needs to be done, I can go back into my old chunks and have my tools there, like kind of the raw materials of the argument are all there. The magic happens when I go over an old chunk again, or I mix chunks together in new formats. This is why I'll often have a notebook post, which I'll then also make a video out of, which might then go in my newsletter or something like this, so kind of different formats, different channels for the same ideas. It's because when I talk about them in different formats or go over the same topic again, it comes out differently. And this coming out differently is a kind of work. It's a kind of creative process that I'm not doing explicitly, but really allows me to notice what comes up in the new context. So if I'm on a podcast and someone asks me a question about creativity or whatever it is that might be interesting to them, I might pull on an old chunk, but in that context, I might say something new, and that adds to the chunk. And that wouldn't have happened, I think, if I was trying to think through from first principles again, or just rehash what I said before. I'm going into the topic that's already contained in a chunk and allowing myself to riff on it, and then something else will come up instead. So if you see my kind of online creativity workflow, all my different channels, you'll see the same ideas pop up across them, but it's part of the evolution of the ideas. And what I found as well is that the more I can do this, the more I let go of holding on to the lower level chunks. So once I have, let's say, 5 chunks, I can then put those together in another chunk, and that becomes one chunk, not 5 chunks, and my working memory is liberated. So as I cycle up through the chunkification process, I can hold higher and higher order, more complex ideas in my mind at once, which I couldn't have done if I was holding all the very large number of small things in and there at once. So this is the value of, as soon as something becomes chunkable, it's too big for working memory to hold all of it, I make a new chunk and then leave that there for a while, riff on it, play with it, and then it becomes quite consolidated and quite firm in my mind. I can then bring other chunks to that level, look at them all at once, and then compress those into one chunk, and on and on and on. And that's how I think I'm able to make these one-take ad-lib videos without too much hesitation, because I just realized that a lot of this argumentation came from a draft essay I wrote when I first took Building a Second Brain 2 years ago. And I never published that, but I went through all the research, Scott Young's work on the working memory article, all that kind of stuff is in there. I'd kind of forgotten it until I was talking about it. It's like, oh no, it's all that article, cool. But now I'm bringing that into the different channels stuff, which I hadn't covered in that article, which isn't published anyway. So I find this really cool. This is how I do creativity, if you like. And hopefully, the more I do this, the more I will find that higher order insights just emerge without me trying too hard for them. So that's it for this time. See you soon.